like run about 15-20 minutes after I got a call, like my face was cold and clammy. My heart had been racing so much when he was lying. It really bothered me. I'm like, I remember today at 2. I hold my secret to myself. You know what I mean? My feelings and how I
You don't understand my control of the electronics.
So it's like, it's just,
Well, yeah, if you want to send me the.
did my breathing exercises,
You want to watch it together or whatever.
into my brain, you know, I mean, did all these different things, and then I'm like, okay. I'm like nauseous.
Or
So.
if we finish here or whatever. I didn't like that feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, I have some other stuff going on after that. Okay.
Actually,
Yeah.
is that how I click from screen to screen?
You know, yeah, I get it. It's like I'm trying to be real. But if it fills your soul a little bit. Oh, yeah, well, if I can do what fills my soul. I know that.
Right?
How is that even possible?
No, it actually.
It fills your soul.
Like, I'm saying like that has to be what she was saying. Are you gonna put it back on? Like, all the stuff to be one day.
Be determined.
I just gotta, you know, I go till the hours.
Do you think Jason was doing
15 hours, take an hour
Candace
and a half out of that.
I'm such a mess.
Oh, no, I don't think they can. The answer is to,
Yes.
there's
an answer? Yes.
you do leave Jen. That is
That's
leave Jen.
why I moved.
Make a small group. A small group of single parents. Or
I see what you're saying.
Parents like yourself. And then you invite people to it. And you say, who else do you know? Who would be good in this group? Who else do they know? Who would be good in this group? And then you get together. I know.
So Kelly, you know how I said I was painting the letters and
Yeah.
so I started
Who else do you know? who would
It's
be great in
actually
this
really
group?
easy now that I started
Really?
doing research
And
on
then you
it.
ask them.
That's
It's
awesome.
So I created a job form last night.
Very cool.
And one of the things I said was like, put something in here to write here.
So
Yeah.
if they
Essentially, I would love to
see
just be able to
you, they would
like,
have
kind
to-
of just copy and paste that
Yep,
right
But
into it.
if they, I mean, this is what's.
absolutely.
And then when
And then like send it to your
ask
peers
us
and
a
past
few
clients and stuff.
questions, can we switch it?
You have to hit that stop
And
share.
just cap it at a certain.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Typically,
So I just need to keep my data.
Very smart.
Absolutely.
You hit stop share.
You
I
know,
saw
I
it
mean-
in that pivot group where someone had did it.
Okay, well, cause I wonder
Are you
if
doing it as a service to your clients and customers?
Well, I'm gonna do the.
Still sitting right there on your desk, for anybody to pick up and look. You know what I mean?
Redeem a file, you know.
Yep, yeah. For my husband, so that's a great
All
idea.
right, well, I
No,
think we will
no, I
get
appreciate
started.
it.
I'm not sure if there's anyone on Zoom. Oh, yes, Kari is. That's Carrie, anyway, pronounced Kari. Thank you so much for coming. I want to be sure to introduce myself and also my distinguished guest, Candace. I'm Melissa Johnson, the broker here at Keller Williams. And, you know, there is a really important form that every contract in the state of Minnesota is required to have included for compliance, and it's the arbitration form. It's a form that I feel like we kind of breeze through and scan through, and it was valuable for me to do the research and better understand some aspects of it. I want to pass that on to you. And then Candace actually is the only realtor that I've ever known in my 23 years who has had to partake in an arbitration case with one of her buyers. So she has graciously offered to talk through what that went like. But before we get started on that, I just want you to see what the objectives are. We're doing these shorter classes, we're calling them power class, so we're just gonna try to be respectful of your time, but punch through some information that I hope you find helpful. We'll talk about the importance of the form. We'll talk about pros and cons of arbitration in the eyes of your buyers and sellers, the background to it and the process of how it works. Candace will talk about the case study, and then I'll also give you some arbitration resources, and when we have time for questions, we'll answer those the best that we can. Starting with this though, because I think this will set your mind at ease a little bit. In all of the, in the entire state of Minnesota, the number of cases that are filed for arbitration per year are on average around 75. And on average, it's typically the buyer who is, having this complaint and seeking funds to cover some material fact that wasn't cared for in their house prior to closing. On average, the dollar awarded is around $20,000, but a little bit below it. In 2013, in the state of Minnesota, the highest award that was ever given to someone who had filed arbitration against their seller was $302,000. So just the basics on arbitration. Arbitration is used as a post-closing dispute on how to handle a conflict between a buyer and seller when the buyer feels like the seller failed to disclose some sort of material fact. It's a 2-page form that you'll fill out with your offer when submitting an offer on a property. And me as your broker, it is a large importance to me for compliance that it be signed or written and declined by all parties. There's a feature in our Instanet where a buyer or seller can elect to sign or not with like a little checkbox. And if they say no, it will leave it blank. And then unfortunately, from everyone else's eyes and perspectives, there's a question, was this even presented to the buyer or the seller who declined it? So you as the agent are gonna have to go the extra step, draw a line through and write declined if that is the wish of your buyer or seller. And then we as agents are also expected to sign it. And it is the position of Keller Williams Preferred Realty that we do think arbitration is a good thing and that we do encourage you as an agent to sign it. However, if you're not comfortable with it, by no means do you need to, and then you would always just get in the habit of writing declined.
Melissa, can I just interrupt and ask a question?
Yes.
So if our buyer declines it, and we sign it, I mean, that doesn't even matter, right? Because it's been declined. So
Exactly.
do you still want us to sign it, or would it wouldn't matter?
Well, I think it's still valuable to sign it because if a possible cause for arbitration comes up, I think it's kind of helpful to understand the mindset of all parties involved. So if it was your mindset that, yeah, I do actually think this would be an efficient way of handling this dispute, I'd like to see that on there. If you feel adamantly against it, like for example, Remax Advantage Plus, position of their brokerage is they would like all their agents to decline it. So then you kind of know what you're up against if you see that the realtor has either signed or declined. Yeah. Something that's really important to understand is if they do sign an agreement of arbitration and they're forced to make this decision right at the time that they make their offer, they are giving up their right to go to court, but they're not giving up their right for representation. They can still hire an attorney who can still be present at arbitration, and that is what your clients did. There are lots of good resources at the end, so you'll get all of those links there. But this is a summary of the pros and cons of arbitration as put together by the Minnesota Association of Realtors. So a pro is that it's less formal and not as complex. The decision is made by an arbitrator, not by a judge. It is generally less expensive than having to go to court. I'm going to skip over this discovery real quick. Something that's really important to understand, though, is that arbitration is final and binding. So if this becomes a lawsuit, the lawsuit could be appealed, but arbitration can never, ever be appealed. It is said that the decisions in arbitration are made more quickly than in the court of law, and also the parties can participate by choosing an arbitrator, where you couldn't necessarily choose your attorney. Some cons to this is you do give up your right to go to court. You give up your right to have a judge and a jury. You give up access to, I think it says something there about court rulings. Skipping back to discovery, you also give up your right to an appeal, as we talked about before. So if you've ever been involved in a lawsuit before, you may have found that there are some attorneys involved in it who demand that documents be provided in order for a decision to be made. And in arbitration, that demand, it actually becomes a lot smaller or a lot less demanding. So that's the discovery of documents. It says that a pro is that the discovery of documents is limited, which means if you're the buyer and you're filing an arbitration claim and you don't want to have to provide, like your inspection report and all these things, that's a pro. But a con is you also don't have to provide those. So you can't make the seller provide those documents. So it falls in both the pros and the cons. Something that I really want you to know as your broker, and this is just a reminder in all instances, your representation of a client, whether it's a buyer or a seller, ends on the date of closing. Your relationship with them will last forever, and they will consider you their representative forever. So they'll reach out to you wanting to know, how can you help me? Because now I've discovered these problems at my house. But you need to remember, you do need to share with them, I'm not an attorney, I can't give legal advice. I also, to protect your liability and ours of the brokerage, I am no longer your representative. So the very best first kind of line, if a dispute comes up like this, is that you would say, hey, let me try to connect you directly with the sellers. Let me check in with that seller's realtor, see if I can put you two parties together. You can talk about your problems and your concerns, and you can resolve it essentially outside of court. So if the buyer and seller can't come to a resolution, that makes sense that you would then turn to filing a lawsuit or filing arbitration. And for this reason, the state of Minnesota's Association of Realtors wanted to come up with something other than having to hire an attorney and go through the judicial system. And that is why they endorse what's called the National Center for Dispute Settlement Center. It's a private and impartial organization. And reminder that claims for arbitration can only be done within 2 months after closing. And also a reminder, when the arbitration suit is filed, you as the realtor cannot fill out any of the forms. They all absolutely have to be done by the buyer themselves. Hearings are usually within about 3 months after you file it. You as the agent may be called, but no guarantee. For example, in Candace's case, she was called, but I as the broker was not. They did not call me to be a witness or to give any explanation for the case. The arbitrator's decision must be rendered within a certain number of dates after the end of the hearing. So that's nice, so that you know that you have a deadline for it. As I mentioned, decisions are final and binding. It is a more generally informal process, and Candace will speak to that. The arbitration hearing is usually held at the property that is the source of the dispute. And if it happens to be something where they find that the damages are less than $15,000, they actually have to be handled in conciliation court. So this is something where when you advise or give recommendations to those buyers who are having concerns, they should get an estimate, because if it's $15,000 or less, they're far better off just going through conciliation court. So Candace, let's jump right to you. Tell us a little background of how you knew the buyer and how the process took place. Just kind of set the stage for me, and then I'll prompt you with some other questions.
So I knew the buyer for a really long time, since I was like a teenager. But she found a house on Zillow while we were searching for houses, not like through the search or anything. And it was a Stella listing, so yeah, it's been on the market for a while. She sent it to me, we went inside, she loved it, offered, got it kind of thing. And they had an offer before, prior to, her seeing it and everything, and it fell apart. And the agent said that, but he said that they took care of all the issues that, were why they backed up.
Came up in the inspection.
Yeah, yep. So, all that happened, whatever, we closed. And then my client moved in. She bought it, had plans on doing some renovations, things like that. Well, she didn't really, so the first thing that kind of flagged her was, the city of Plymouth came and said, hey, there's a sun porch and it was built without a permit. And it's also giving way because the soil and everything, there's a creek. Let me say, there's this creek back there, kind of down. You would never go, like, if we were showing a house, like there's a fence, a drop off, creek. So, fence, you'd probably just kind of stop looking at the yard, look over a little bit. But they were doing some work in the creek, the city. So they said, the retaining wall back here has failed, and your porch is built and it shouldn't be here because it didn't have a permit, and it's too close to a wetland, so the soil is doing all its stuff, and the porch is no longer safe. Yeah. So that was kind of the first thing. Then they started doing some remodeling, and it was like weird stuff. Like they put drywall and put like a fake black window in there, like the seller said, So it was just a lot of weird things and stuff that they did like that. So, but the porch was like the biggest thing in this retaining wall. So once, the city came, my buyers jumped the fence, went down in the creek to see what they were talking about. And then there, like I said, the retaining wall was failing, but you could see where the seller had took bags of mulch and shoved in the retaining wall to kind of make it stand up again. And, did things like that to kind of make it look good.
Was that the part of the property, or was, okay.
Yeah, it was part of the property. So you can see where they had did those things. They put this fake, like this fence there, but it really wasn't in anything. And then, like during the looking process, I did, she was asking about this porch, and she did ask me actually if there were permits pulled. And I, thank God I did, was like, on the seller's disclosure, it says, because it asked were proper permits pulled, and I said it says it was. And I did tell her too, you can go online and look up any permits too, and this was during COVID.
And you did this in writing,
Yeah.
which really helped you, because she was able to pull that together.
Yeah.
Some things you think, gosh, maybe I should just tell them verbally so that it's not in writing, and other things it's so important to have it in writing. But when it comes down to something like this, having that in writing was very valuable.
It was. And so, I told her where she could look. She looked on the city of Plymouth. I looked on the city of Plymouth too. And I looked on my phone screenshot. I was like, these are the permits I found for the city of Plymouth. I don't know what this means, because it's like another language, some parts of a permit when you read it. I'm like, I don't know what this means, but these are the permits that were pulled, and this is all I see online, but I still sent her the information to kind of do your due diligence kind of thing. So all of that happened. Obviously it failed. She ended up having to get the porch taken off, get the retaining wall fixed, this wall with this fake window, and it was moisture and all that, so getting all of that stuff fixed. So that's how it kind of came about. And then she was pretty pissed because it was like it was over 100K. It was like 150, 160K, like all of her bids were.
And was she upset with you?
At first, no.
She started to pull out all the stops as the time went by.
Then it just finally wrapped up. This happened a couple of years ago now.
2 years ago for sure.
And I just got done with recently.
Right. So talk us through. Okay, so she closes on the house. She's super excited.
Yep.
She contacts you how far after closing to say, something's going on, the city of Plymouth is knocking on my door?
Maybe 2 or 3 months. It wasn't like crazy. It wasn't a huge gap.
And at that time, you did the absolute best thing, and you came to me. And I will admit, I had to learn through the process. So I'm really grateful that you helped me learn through this. Now I do know, and I can be a better advisor. But the very first thing you need to do is come to your broker, because I can help with errors and omissions insurance. I can remind you of these pros and cons and what to do and what not to do. So you gave her copies of all of her contract, pointed her in the direction of the arbitration form that has the website that says this is where you go for the National Center of Dispute. And it actually, it's pretty simple and easy to fill it out. It's not that difficult of a form. So she filled out the form, and then,
That was really easy. She filled it out, sent in, you have to send in a check of like, I think she had to spend, like, depending on how many arbitrators you wanted. But it was like, for a single arbitrator or two or for 3 or something, you had to pay, and it was like $2,000-ish. She had to send in a check with her.
So now she getting more mad because she already done got bids for 150.
Oh, totally.
And I gotta pay to be mad about.
Right. So it asks for the demand form, any evidence, this form, any evidence, completed purchase agreement and addenda, the arbitration disclosure, and that's where it's so important to have it written declined on it, because if you can't understand what the intent of the other party or the other realtor is, it can be so confusing. So it needs to be written, signed, or declined for when we turn this in, and then if applicable, possibly the full inspection report.
And she had her house inspected too.
So she filed the arbitration claim, and then how long do you think it took until she was receiving communication from them?
It didn't take long to start getting communication. Like, I know she got a communication right away because she like express mailed it, wanted them to like sign it, that they received it, kind of thing. But I don't, from the time she filed to the day we had arbitration was maybe 2 months or
Okay.
so,
Wow.
2 or 3 months.
Yeah,
It
and
wasn't-
then kind of like a case manager is assigned, right? Like then there's an office admin type of professional who communicates, not with me because I was not, considered to be a party to this transaction, but they were communicating with you because you were named, right? So you would
Yeah,
forward everything to me,
yep,
to keep me in the loop.
Yeah, and I was named in some of it. It was more so after the sellers, but she hired an attorney and her attorney wanted me to like witness to things that we had, like that I had saw and things that I had done and did, all that kind of stuff.
So you walk in the door and what's the setting like?
It was at her house. And they were like at the dining room, it felt like court. I was like, but
Yes,
they're like sitting at the dining room table, like the arbitrator's here, my client and her attorney is here. The seller is here at her house, sitting there.
at her former house.
She still lives there.
Oh, got it. You mean the buyer?
Yeah, right, yes, the
Yes.
seller's former house,
Yeah.
house, yep. So we're all sitting there and then,
Did the seller have an attorney?
he did have an attorney, which was actually his closer.
Oh.
This story is like, I know a lot more than the average person would with that case because of how well I knew her. So, she told me like kind of everything that happened while we were talking, like things that were going on. But yes, we were all sitting there, his attorney, his agent, we were sitting like on the couch waiting to be called. It was intense, like it was
And were they
intense.
walking around the house? Did they say like, come here and look at this firsthand?
Well, first we all, they did the sitting, we all talked about it, and then at the end, the arbitrator, you get up and you go and show him everything that you're saying is the issue. So,
Okay.
I mean, he brought his hiking boots, cause we had to hike down to the creek and where the retaining wall. Yeah, so he got all in there, he was taking pictures, like, he was all in there. And
How long did it last? How long were you there?
I didn't stay to the end because they told me I could leave after a while, but I was there for maybe 2 or 3 hours.
Well, how long did it last if you didn't stay till the end?
So it was probably it was like at least half the day. I mean,
Wow.
it was very thorough though. Like he asked, they presented all their evidence with their attorney. They did the same. They asked questions, crossing. It was like legit court in the house.
Just in the house.
Did
It
you
was like
have
house
to
court.
Yeah, we had to
swear
yeah,
for
take-
the
yeah.
whole truth, the oath? Yeah.
The oath. Yeah, it was legit court in a house.
Candace, can I ask how, and it's not super relevant, but a little bit, how long did that seller own the house before he sold it?
Oh, he raised his kids there, so like
Oh, so
18
like
ever.
at least. Yeah.
So
for
it's not
forever.
like he went, lived
It
there,
wasn't like
lived there
a
for
flip.
2 years
And didn't
and-
know,
right.
That's a good question.
No.
which is why they went to arbitration.
Yeah. Yep.
So then how far after the arbitration hearing were the results delivered?
I think they had 60 days kind of thing. It wasn't like crazy long. It was like 60 days.
And she wasn't real happy with the determination, right?
No, but to paint a picture, her attorney told her, because she had a real estate attorney, that most arbitration cases, like, you were lucky if you get awarded half of what you asked for. You're lucky. So he set that tone before it even happened. So she asked for, it was like, almost 200, what was it, 180, I think, from the seller.
Okay.
And she ultimately won 90K, so, but she wasn't happy about that.
And something interesting to know about arbitration is that there's no judicial system that makes the seller provide that money,
No,
right? This
Oh,
was a part of
really?
the process as well.
yeah,
So that's one thing I was gonna ask about is, what if the seller doesn't, I mean, how does
Don't
that
pay
work?
Have it, doesn't want to.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
well, so he didn't pay, obviously, you get a judgment, and he has, they say X amount of days to pay. Of course, the day came, didn't pay anything like that, so then now what she could do was start, doing judgments, like to try to get a lien on their house or stuff like that, try to recoup her money, but there's no you can enforce payment, but the same way a bill collector enforces payment on a
Right.
person, which, you know,
Unless the lien is on the house and then they go to try to sell it, that's the
but they had
only
just
way.
bought their house.
So
And
they
they
ain't
bought
going
a
nowhere.
one-level living, they moved to one, they were dying there. Like, that's why they bought
The
it.
lien wasn't gonna be their problem down the road.
Exactly, like, okay, we'll deal with it.
So your buyers just stuck out.
So she wasn't happy, didn't get the money. So then I think it kind of turned into her trying to get the money, recoup her funds from any way she could. So she filed, with the Department of Commerce against me and the other agent that we were that they basically sent a really nasty letter. I got to the office and they were like, "Do you have a certified letter from an attorney? We put it on your desk." And Melissa was here, thank the Lord, because I came down.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
It was so, but
It's awful.
it was bad. So that
Who would
happened.
do that to Candace?
That's right.
I had no clue, lady, and I was on your side. I came to
Right.
arbitration,
Yeah.
and we weren't named as like someone who did anything wrong during arbitration because they can't come after the brokerage, the seller, like. But they didn't, we weren't named as doing anything wrong in it. We were more so named as a witness to what I had done and the steps I had taken as my role in the arbitration, I guess I would say. But after she filed that with the Department of Commerce, first she did the attorney letter, the attorney sent us a letter. I cried to Melissa and we activated the E&O and got an attorney and I met with him. He responded to their attorney and then it shut up for a while,
A long time.
a long time,
Till it resurfaced again.
recently.
Oh, jeez.
Because then she filed a complaint with the Department of Commerce saying that I didn't represent her right and all this stuff. Update your address with the Department of Commerce, word to the wise. Because I got a nasty letter because they had sent, yeah, you better do it.
Within 10 days of changing your address, you have to
Actually,
notify the
Victoria has to
Department
do
of
it for you.
Okay, I haven't changed my address yet.
Tell Victoria to do it today.
But she hasn't changed it yet.
Because it just is like,
And
it
your last
comes
name.
with every single Department of Commerce complaint. It comes as like a little sidekick in the, tushy, that if you haven't done
And your
that,
last name.
they are mad at
She
you.
hasn't changed her last name yet.
Well,
technically, but-
I don't know so when we signed our marriage certificate,
It's changed.
it's changed.
But
So,
it's not
okay,
changed.
but it's
If your
not
social
changed.
hasn't changed, if
My
legally not,
social hasn't changed either,
then you're
but
not changed.
I'll just,
Either way, I would go talk to Victoria and get at least your address updated. So the Department of Commerce thing happened and I didn't know that I had a hearing coming up, until I got a scary email and I called Melissa again.
Like, hey, bestie.
Well, and so, yeah, literally, so I didn't update my address. My last name was not changed. And my email address. Because when I first started real estate, I used my old Remax email address because I didn't know. And so they had tried to email me this letter about my hearing, didn't get it, email me, didn't get it. He found my email address through KW because he knows I'm licensed through here. And that's when I finally got it and it was in like a week. Oh.
Sorry, I can't come to your closing, you gotta go to court.
Oh, I had to go. So, but we did that and that worked out fine. I didn't get fined, but the attorney said, you'll probably get this case probably won't be anything. What you need to be concerned about is because your address and your email address wasn't, they'll probably slap you with $1,000 fine at least.
Oh.
And I was like, oh. All right, I'll take the $1,000 fine
Over everything else
the
that's
worst,
going on, yeah.
but, if that's the worst that could happen to me, I guess.
Oh my God.
Did you get a fine?
No, I didn't get anything after all of that. But Victoria can do it for you, Tati, just do it.
okay, yeah, I will.
Make it a top priority.
Yeah.
So what's going on?
So she had said, she had filed her complaint with the Department of Commerce, said what happened. And then I had a hearing with the Department of Commerce person, I can't remember his name, or something. And it was online. Melissa could not be in the room. I had to attest there was nobody in the room with me. My attorney could be, but he was on Zoom with us, so that worked out fine. And it was the guy through the who I had met with the first time, so that was nice. But he just kind of asked me what happened and was asking me specific questions about what happened with the arbitration, and that at the end, he kind of told me, okay, well, you'll be, I don't even remember his words, but
He knew they were just upset that they didn't get money from them, so.
That's what it was.
And in the end, has she still not gotten any money?
I haven't talked to her.
Yeah.
I haven't talked to her.
Yeah, she tried to sue you.
Although and so she sent me a text message, which was really funny, like, I've decided to, let Godspeed be Godspeed, I forgive you.
What?
And I looked at that text message and I wanted to say, so I responded very kindly, oh, that's amazing, I forgive you too. And she goes, she goes,
That's awesome.
what exactly do you forgive me for?
Oh,
And I
gosh.
said, you know what?
Godspeed.
And and so I just kindly responded, the details have been hashed out, no need to keep going down this path. It is what it is at this point. I forgive you, you forgive me. Let's move on.
Wow.
Good, good.
Wow.
Well, speaking of moving on, that was an emotional process for you and probably emotional to rehash today. So thank you for sharing your wisdom. Lots to be taken from that, perhaps even not agreeing to arbitration.
That's what I
If
was gonna say.
just remember, as a realtor, you cannot offer advice as to whether your buyers should or should not agree to
So
it.
really, the best thing in our own interest, as well as the buyer or even seller's interest, because they have to sign it too when someone, submits an offer, is like that sheet that the pros and cons.
Yep.
As I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, maybe I need to put that in my buyer consult paperwork so
for
that they
sure.
can start thinking, start researching, because that is one of my biggest struggles when I'm going through
Yes.
especially with a first-time buyer, and especially with somebody who's got lots of questions. There's some people who are like, oh, so just send the offer, I'll sign it, whatever, and they don't need to know any details, and that's,
Yeah.
good in the moment, but maybe not in, in the grand scheme of things, but,
Because she was upset she couldn't,
Go
do
to court.
anything after
Yeah.
she didn't only got awarded, 90K
yeah,
of it.
yeah,
Like she wanted more,
yeah.
and
And there was
arbitration,
legal
that was
recourse.
the end of it.
Well, and I always,
But that saved me because she couldn't file anything against me or anything because arbitration had already been done
Yeah.
and you already was awarded on these things. All the things that you said were wrong and we already found who was guilty of that. The seller, not her.
whenever I meet with a seller and I give them the seller disclosure, I explain to them that if you are hiding it, or, if you're not disclosing everything and it becomes an issue down the road, for the next 2 years, you could be on the hook. Yeah. And so hopefully that gets people thinking twice before going, oh, I don't need to disclose that or whatever.
And
But
that's what they
apparently
usually
not,
think.
because
So
the
what do you
seller
think could be on the
is not out
arbitration
anything,
What's that?
and that's not fair.
For 24 months after closing, right? Then the buyer can come back.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I see what you're saying. I thought you meant something further.
Yeah. What did you just say, Misha?
Basically, we still have some.
Yeah? Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because the seller is not out anything. They were completely
True.
wrong.
True.
So this buyer doesn't get any recourse. Yay, you're awarded 90,000. One, that's not gonna pay for the work.
Now, but keep in mind, she's a case where they didn't. And in the state of Minnesota, there are far more cases where they do.
Yeah.
The seller does the right thing and they do.
So if
Why
they
did
sign,
not,
if they sign arbitration, they can still arbitrate if they choose to,
Yes.
can't they? This is just saying, I give up my right to go to court.
To go to court, yes. Yes, exactly. So if they,
So maybe it's best just to advise people not to sign it, because they can still do.
You can't
they
advise
can
people.
give
Well,
advice.
wait a minute,
Oh, well,
though.
not advise, yes,
wait
you're
a
right.
minute though, because, not necessarily, because if they decline it on the
Mhm.
arbitration form,
Uh-huh.
then they can't arbitrate.
Oh,
So
okay,
all parties
okay.
have to agree to arbitration.
yeah.
Now, that's not to say that after the fact, the seller may say like, oh yeah, rather than taking me to court, maybe we should all agree to
Mhm.
arbitration. If they agree,
Mhm.
then.
Right, so if
you're good.
all of the other three parties don't want to, and I say, I don't want to, but they do.
Yeah.
But then we get into something, I can say, okay, I'll do it,
Yes.
right? Yeah, and that's how I have explained that too, because Kim Hummus used to be paralegal. And she told me that. She said, you can always go back and do it, but if you sign it, and then you're kind of committed, so.
If you sign it saying that you won't do
That
it.
you will.
Oh, that you will do, okay,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, but if you leave it open-ended and you don't sign it, then, and I never know, I thought, for some reason, I thought Keller Williams always wanted, I didn't know you guys, like, Keller Williams didn't want us to sign it.
Yeah.
Yeah, she had said that
do.
before you
Yeah.
came.
Well, okay,
I'm just gonna say.
but I still have the right to
to,
not.
To Carrie and to Heidi, I'm gonna end the meeting right now. I have to drive to get my parents at the airport. So I'm just gonna formally log out. If you have any questions, just email me directly, okay, gals?